You were one of the key architects of this big package, 750 billion euros in aid and in stimulus that's just passed through the Bundestag right behind us. Walk us through how this is going to work. How much of it is actual stimulus? How much of it is for liquidity? How much of it goes to people on the streets? How much for companies?
So the first is that there is a credit line for the federal budget, which is 156 billion. And this will be enough, for instance, to finance all the needs we have to give support to small companies, for instance, who have closed their shop because they can't open it anymore, but will have to pay the rent. We have, for instance, extra money which we give to our social insurance system to make it feasible to support those who are now in a situation that they don't have any work. We have a special scheme which helps us to give money to the companies that they could be together with their employees without putting them out of the job, and we pay for the wages. And we have a lot of money which we will use with our social system that is already existing, giving people access to income, which they need if they, for instance, are self-employed and don't have any income anymore. So we can open it to them, and this will be also extra money. We have some reserves which are in this package, and aside of this, there is a lot of decisions to make it feasible for us to support the economy with instruments we already have. There is our promotional bank with the KfW, which we already gave the opportunity that they could give loans to all the business together with the usual banks, but so there is no risk for the banks and they can give the liquidity to the companies. And
which was a 500 billion euro. I mean, these are big packages, big numbers. If you put them all together, it totals well over €1 trillion. What you've done today and what you did with the KfW last week.
But in the end, this is just, but really, the chance that we make it feasible that the banking sector is still doing its service to the economy. And this is with the background of our KfW, the promotional bank. And the same is with the other decision. We used a fund which we had during the last crisis, 2008 and 2009, the Financial Market Stability Fund, which was drawn to give the chance to finance stocks or other ways of giving money for the companies of the financial sector at that time. And we now changed it and moved it to the real economy. And so this fund will again have the possibility to give money to companies and, for instance, to buy stocks and give them the strength to stem the crisis.
Let me ask about the actual cash, though, right? Because it's, I think, only 156 billion that you're actually borrowing, and new money, fresh stimulus, the street is calling it. Is that enough?
This will be enough for the next months because we just will have to make it feasible that the economy survives. And you should always understand that there is a very successful system of social welfare state which is working as an automatic stabilizer. The robust social welfare system of Germany is, I think, one of the most effective systems in the world to deal with a crisis and making feasible that the people don't lose their incomes and give them confidence in a very difficult situation. So the question of stimulus is coming when we are through this situation. Then I think it's absolutely necessary that we not just wait for the economy to run again.
So on the other side of this crisis, you mean after you've got the spread of the coronavirus in check, then Germany is going to have to think about, you're already working on another stimulus package.
This is something we could do then, and we are thinking about the possibilities, the needs, and what would be very effective. I think it's there is some sense in what the economists tell us, saying it must be timely and targeted and it must be temporary. So instruments like this that help the economy to start again. And on the other hand,
what kind of size are you thinking? Because Germany has a love for the 50 billion number. We saw that the EU MTS auction was 50 billion, the 2008 crisis package was 50 billion, the last environmental package was about 50 billion. Are we talking about more than that now? Can we break out of that number?
We will do the necessary things, and we are able to do the necessary things. And this will very much depend on the situation which we'll have after the situation ceased. We are in now. And I think the more important question is that we get through this situation to be able to do things like that. Because in the situation right now, it would be a bit ridiculous to do some activity so that tourism is booming at the same time when we stop tourism. So it is not the right way to the right thing to do.
Of course, but you bring up an interesting point. Germany has given itself the ability to do this kind of stimulus. You brought your debt down to 60% of GDP. A lot of countries have had difficulty with that. How much firepower does that give you? How much room, how much space do you think you have now?
I think we have all the firepower we need, and we will use it. This is the message we give to anyone. And it was always the idea behind our fiscal strategies. When I discussed on the question why it might make sense to reduce the public debt, it was always my argument saying it is because there might be a crisis, and then we need the strength to do the necessary things. Now we are in a crisis we haven't expected, because it's something that came to mankind all of a sudden in a way, but now we have the strength and we will use it.
So how high could you go? Would you be willing to, if necessary, go to 90% of GDP or 100% of GDP?
It makes no sense to speculate about numbers like this. It's just necessary to know that we will not be enforced to do not to do something which we understand as sensible, because all the things that are necessary that will work will be done.
You mentioned it doesn't make any sense to try and boost the tourism industry right now. That's certainly true. Companies like Lufthansa have seen their debt ratings cut to junk. They're, for all intents and purposes, not really operating anymore. How do you make sure that credit continues to flow to companies like that they don't fire workers, that they don't need to reduce capacity during this crisis?
So first, we give them, as any other company, the chance to save liquidity with this short-term allowance. We discussed about this, which gives them the possibility to employ the people, though there is no work, because we give them the money for doing so.
So when they get that money, do they have to also agree not to lay off workers?
They will stay to the workers at that time. And on the other hand, we have the instruments for liquidity we discussed about, and we have also the instrument to give money to the company, which is more in the way of stocks. And there are different and several instruments just to make it feasible for them to get through the crisis so that they can start after the crisis again. And our aim is not to continue with, for instance, government stocks or so. It is just that we say we are able to help you with all the different means, but afterwards we will put all the money out again and it will be private.
So you don't expect to be actually taking stakes in these companies when you rescue or when you bail them out? I hate to use that term because it's pejorative, but when you save them, you don't then take a stake in the company as part of that deal?
So we might buy stocks or so, but it is not for all the time. It's just for the situation of the crisis.
Speaking of buying stocks, when I look at the drop in value of a lot of these companies that we cover on a daily basis, they've lost a third, some of them a half of their value. Are you worried that other investors in other countries, for example, China has recovered relatively quickly and Germany's just at the start of this, are going to be able to come in here and acquire German assets at a discounted value?
We would be able to react to that with legal measures, but also with a lot of fiscal money we could use.
But will you be considering nationalizing some German companies in order to save them from foreign takeovers?
I think this will be not really necessary, because we will have ways to avoid a situation like this.
the money that's earmarked for bailouts now, how do you expect that to, how much do you expect to spend? How much do you expect you're going to need in order to save companies throughout the crisis?
It is quite difficult to give numbers in this question. It's only important that we have the ability to do anything that is necessary and that we are willing to do it.
In terms of the companies that you've looked at helping or that you talked about helping and the people that you've talked about helping, I don't see any banks in there. You're focused mostly on the industrial engine here and the consumers, the voters, the people. What about banks? Are they going to need any help?
It doesn't look like this, because if we make it feasible for them to continue with their business and giving liquidity to the economy with the background of our money of the promotional bank, I think it will be enough for them. And if we stabilize the companies of the economy, it will also stabilize the banks. So it is not directly, it's just helping them to be successful with their clients.
So you're not concerned about an economic crisis that snowballs into a financial crisis, or you're taking action to stop that?
It is not looking like this, and it makes no sense to speculate about it.
Let me ask you about the other countries in Europe. You're involved in meetings to try and shore up countries that haven't put themselves in as strong a fiscal position as Germany in the past, Italy, for example. How important is it to you to show solidarity, to help other countries that need Germany's help in Europe?
It's absolutely key that we stick together in the European Union and also in the Eurozone. And we are willing to do it. We are discussing about the ways how this could be successful. So some decisions already have been taken. The European Commission allowed any country to use fiscal activities to fight against the crisis, the medical crisis, but also the crisis which is linked to the economy following the pandemic. And secondly, the Commission is looking at its own budget, whether there is some room for maneuver that they could use to support countries that need help. We decided that there should be relatively free room for activities which are linked a little bit with state aid, just for the situation of the crisis, but not forever, but now when it's necessary. And I think it's also correct that we discussed about the activities that could be done, for instance, by the EIB, because this is something like a promotional bank on the European level, and it could be absolutely useful, especially in those countries where the national banks of that sort are not working that effective or are not big enough or are not really existing, that this could be done by the EIB, which would be very useful. And in the end, we have the instrument we developed after the last crisis with, for instance, the ESM. And so it's absolutely useful to look at these possibilities to be prepared for situations which possibly might not arise, but it is necessary that we know that we are much stronger than 10 years ago.
So it looks like the ESM there will be a precautionary credit line from the ESM up to 2% of GDP. I want to give you a quote from Holger Schmieding at Berenberg Bank, who was talking about the Eurogroup decision. He says, the Eurogroup result shows that, once again, when it comes to actions of seriously impressive scale in the Eurozone, the ECB is the only institution that's really capable of that. Is he wrong, or is that by design?
No, there is the ECB, yes, but there are also other institutions and instruments we have. And as we already discussed, we are looking at them and discussing what could be a useful activity. So
but he's just saying you're not coming out with the bazooka. The Eurogroup isn't going to do whatever it takes.
I think we have the necessary instruments, and there is a difference to the United States, for instance. If you would understand whether the amount of money that is now used from fiscal perspectives to fight against the crisis, you have to count the activities of all the member states of the European Union or of the Eurozone. You cannot just look at the European level because this is different to the United States. But if you count the things together, it will be not of that different size.
One thing we have in the United States, though, is a shared currency. We have a single central bank, solidarity between the states, and so we assume shared debt. Why isn't Germany willing to go forward and take that step towards a more complete union? 9 other country leaders in Europe are pushing, including the French, for what are being called Corona bonds, or what typically are called Euro bonds.
I think the more important question is to understand what is the activities of these European levels compared to the United States. For instance, if you look at defense, you will not find anything as Europe. You will find the national armies, and you will understand that, for instance, the taxes are raised from the states to pay for defense. This is the same if you look, for instance, at the social welfare systems. The United States welfare system is mostly on the union level. This is not the case in Europe. It's something that is working in different ways, but in all the member states. So if you want to understand the differences, you have to take into account that a lot of responsibilities and revenues are still on the national level, which are in the United States on the federal level. And so it is necessary that we coordinate our policies. This is what we do, that we develop European instruments that could be used together, and that we make a very precise and very effective use of them. And as I already said, I think we will manage to be successful with this. And my view on the question is also that if we do this effectively, we are as strong as if we would be one body. And this is the more important question if we look at the politics in this field. You could understand that Germany will work for solidarity in the European Union, and that we understand it's necessary to fight together, and this will happen.